gone a very long way since 1999, the last time I coded JavaScript. So that dates me. So now, it can do all kinds of stuff on the back end that your favorite Java can do, and all kinds of crazy stuff on the front end. So we'll start with the basics today, and tomorrow we'll have a continuation talking about the cool progressive frameworks like AngularJS and Backbone. And we'll start with intro today. On the floor.
Thank you, Amelia.
Joe, is that a camera, and is that supposed to be moving that one over in front of Cat?
Yeah, so this is our new video conferencing thing, and I think it's supplied to us by the NSA because it's got a mind of its own and it moves. It's a little freaky.
Pointing at Julie.
I present you guys now, so just FYI.
Just don't.
I make no claims.
Do not follow through.
All right. So, first of all, hello, everyone.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Joe.
I'm really glad for the turnout because I see like data science. I see. Is there anyone from tech ops? I don't think so, but there's data team. There's there's the RTB people. So it's great, and I think there's even a few non-coders here. Yeah, I remember Ishmael said he wasn't a coder as well. But oh, hey, welcome. So first of all, I wanted to ask, does anyone here know a little JavaScript? If you do, please raise your hand. We got a few. How about a lot of JavaScript? A lot of JavaScript. Oh.
Expert's not sure.
Oh, what about a lot of Java? Pretty much the whole room. That's great, but it's going to be impossible for me to teach you JavaScript in an hour. I'll try. And also have a range of people. Some don't know code, some know a little JavaScript, and some know quite a lot. But what I'm hoping to do, and I put a little thought into this, is take you on a little journey so that each of you has something to take away, even if you don't know code. I will be delving into a lot of code, but they'll be in piecemeal, and you'll see the results on the screen straight away. So if you're not a coder, this should give you an idea of what is possible. And you might see, oh, I didn't know I could do that, and you could come up with an application or a way to do that and know that a developer can do that. So in order to give you this, I'm going to start with a high-level explanation, go through some code, some simple examples, complex examples, and then if we have the time at the end, I'll jump off the deep end and look at a closure and a library. So hopefully we can all see that. So the front end is comprised of three technologies: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and jQuery. I kind of grouped JavaScript and jQuery together. You'll see for a reason at the end. And neither is dependent on the other. They all work very, very well together, and they're quite enmeshed together. But this creates a problem because what does what? And how do we stop them getting mixed up? If you see a fancy website, do you know what is actually JavaScript or what is CSS? What's doing what? So when I think of the top view of this, it pays to have, well, I like to have an image in mind of what I'm working with. And when you code with a language, you get a feel for that language. So I've come up with a couple of images to sort of, which I hope you'll walk away from this presentation with, thinking of these languages with that image in mind. And the image that I associate with CSS, even when I'm coding, is that of a flowing stream of water. And there's a reason for that. Who can tell me the famous person who said water can flow and crash? Yep. Well, hopefully there won't be any crashing, but we'll definitely see the flow of CSS.
Wait, what was that?
And the C in CSS stands for cascading, which refers to the systems of inheritance. CSS is cascading style sheets. And it's a really beautiful language once you've mastered it, once you know it. And it's constant and an all-pervading presence in the DOM. JavaScript can come and go, but CSS is always there. The image I've chosen for JavaScript actually is a crowbar. Now, there's a reason for that as well. A crowbar is a heavy-handed device. It can be inserted into two pieces of machinery and separate them. In fact, sometimes one of the sayings I've had when working with other developers is if you can do it with CSS, do it rather than reach for the JavaScript crowbar, because JavaScript can do a lot of the same things that CSS can, especially when it comes to animation and moving things around. Let CSS do the heavy lifting. Let the decision making be done by jQuery. And this is where the two mesh together really, really well. I'm going to show you that with some code. So I've got an empty HTML document here. I'm just going to open that in the browser. As you can see, there's nothing there. I've also got some code snippets, so I'm going to move fairly quickly here. Free one, Coda. Actually, I think they charge now. They've gone up in price. I got it when it was free. So there's a DOM, and there's a reason for me picking an empty HTML document and dropping this in, because then you guys know what you're seeing. There's no JavaScript in here at all. So if I refresh this, as expected, we've got, and a great way to show what CSS can do is I'm going to drop in a huge blob of CSS, and you'll see how much this can change. And the reason for this is if I show you what CSS can do, then you'll start to realize what maybe you needn't do with JavaScript. So I'll refresh that. And you see things have completely changed. I kept the old window open. This is something I threw together really quickly, so design-wise it's not great. But I should be able to position them side by side, and we can have a quick look at the differences.
So the first one was just HTML.
The first one has no CSS at all. Some of the immediate things you saw is that an image appeared. We've got a tiled background. We can see a gradient of white. The first 4 words of the first paragraph have been accented. The order has changed visually. You can see down here, our A tags in the LI elements are now up the top, and they've changed format. There's even a little rollover effect. And if I had time, I'd show you animation that CSS can do too. This is what I mean by heavy lifting. So now that you've seen what CSS can do, let's have a look at what we can do with JavaScript and jQuery. So in a browser, JavaScript is loaded unless you go into the browser and change the settings to disable JavaScript. But jQuery isn't. So I'm just going to add jQuery in. I'm going to close this one because I don't think we need it. We'll just keep this one open. And I'm just going to go to my favorite cloud content delivery for scripts, which is cdnjs. And I'll just look for jQuery. My top result here. Just picking the minified one. Oh. And I'm just going to copy the URL, zip back to my code, and I'm going to create a whole bunch of space because I don't really want to see all the CSS. This isn't a CSS presentation, so just get it down here and so now we've got jQuery loaded, and I'll refresh. You won't see a difference. but it's there. So how do we know it's there? There's a quick test. I'm just going to bring up the inspector. For those of you who don't know what the inspector is or have never used it, it's a fast way to test Java. It does many things, but the JavaScript console here is a really great way to run JavaScript in the browser and perform operations. And I often use it for prototyping or testing stuff. But to test that jQuery is loaded, you type $.fn.jQuery. And it should be loaded. It tells us the version.
I'm sorry, can you make text bigger? Can you do Command plus?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for calling that out. So let's have some fun while we're here. I'm gonna rip into the DOM and use the crowbar. So if I were to quickly look at the code, you can see here that there's a class second para. So let's target that. If I write $, so here is a quick line of code that should totally change the DOM. Let's give it a go. Hopefully I haven't made a typo. And it did. What we've done here is we've targeted a CSS class here and switched the text. So this is a really, really simple, quick example of how we can change the DOM. This is the crowbar coming into effect. And there's a whole library of methods for jQuery. If you just Google jQuery API or jQuery documentation, you can see loads of them. Another example might be if I were to target the H1. And I'll just give myself some quotes and throw in a whole new element, div/div. And I'll give it an ID. And I'll call it my button. Everyone see? Okay. And I actually want to throw some text in there. I'll call it my button. Just make sure I haven't got any typos.
First, my button. The first.
Oh, thank you. So that, provided I haven't made any typos, should insert a whole new element into the DOM. And there it is up there. You can just see it. But it's a little hard to see. So we can also apply CSS to it straight from this console. And I can target the element that I've just added. So if I were to take my button and put it here, lime, that should make the text lime, and it did. But I actually don't like it lime. I'm just going to revert it to black because there's a much better way to do this. Instead of us using JavaScript and jQuery to inject CSS straight on there, I want to go back to our picture here. Because once again, we can let CSS do the heavy lifting. Keep this in mind. I'm going to use JavaScript to control CSS. If I were to go back to my blob of CSS, I've actually got a class here called coolButton and a whole stack of rules. So why not imagine you've got a stream of CSS. You grabbed your crowbar and you've jammed it in, and you can leverage left or leverage it right, and every time you move it, you redirect the stream. You can split the stream in half. You can make it join up again. That's what we're going to do here. So I will just target the button and add a class, which would be coolButton, provided I spelled it right. spelled normally. Double check. So that should add a CSS class, which then apply all the rules in one hit. And it did. It even has a hover effect. So here we're seeing an example of how the two can be used together. Let CSS do a lot of the heavy lifting. Use your JavaScript sparingly to control the flow of the CSS, and you can get a lot more done a lot quicker. And it helps when you're debugging your application or your website, because you've got a whole lot less JavaScript to go through.
Is this the place like inspector console where you do?
I'm just going to get to that.
Show us.
I'm just going to get to that. So I'm going to take a quick diversion away from this little example here, and I'm going to pull up an early prototype I did for all voices. There's some pieces I've removed, like there was some annoying copy, which will get in the way of what I'm trying to talk about. But here, if I hover over anywhere on this picture, you'll see a couple of effects taking place. The image goes darker, and the social icons animate down. And you can have a little fun if you go crazy there. So this is handled with a really, really small amount of code. This is all that's happening. If we look at it, I'm targeting a container. I'm looking for an article. I'm listening to the mouse entering and the mouse leaving. And all I'm doing is adding a class. That's it. A really small amount of JavaScript is having a huge effect. It's the crowbar in the stream. The stream's constantly flowing. I'm just inserting the crowbar at exactly the right point to have maximum effect, minimum line of code. So I'll just close this out because I don't need that example anymore. So I want to touch back on what somebody over here said about the console. If I were to refresh this, all my changes are gone, because the work that I'm doing in the console is temporary. It's a little sandbox. It's not saved. What happens if we want to make this permanent? So if I were to go back to my file here and start putting the code in here, then we're saving it. So I'll just type script type equals text slash JavaScript. Oops. And I'll just create a bunch of space to scroll that off the top. So at the moment we've got jQuery loaded here, and we have an empty script tag which we can dump JavaScript in here. And what I'm going to do is actually going to crash, and I'm going to show you how and why. I'm just going to go back to our button that we want to add. I'll paste that in, so that should add the button. And another line that I wanted was this one here. Save that, and I'm going to refresh, and nothing's happened. Why didn't it happen?
Because the document is not loaded.
Exactly. This is an asynchronous problem because the line is working. This code here is executing, but it's executing before all of the HTML is loaded. And I didn't want to assume that some of you knew this. This is why I'm covering basics first, but this is a gotcha that we often find. So you need to make sure that all of this has arrived in the page before this executes. One way to do this is to move this script to the bottom of the page. I personally don't like doing that. There are good reasons to do it, but as you move into MVC frameworks, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow, you tend to have a lot of your stuff together in the head where it's easily found, and everything is separated into modules. So you want to detect that the DOM has loaded, and there's a few different ways that it can be written in syntax, but the most common way is $document ready. And this little simple task here, insert in here we put an anonymous function, split it open, and the code we want we move inside. So here we're detecting that the document's ready. As soon as the listener detects it's ready, it fires this function. It's kind of like a callback. Think of it as that. And then these two will execute. So if I run it, there's our button. So what I've been showing you so far has mostly been jQuery, not really JavaScript. And it's been a lot of DOM manipulation. When I say DOM, I'm talking about the document object model or all the HTML in this up here. I want to do a little combining this with some vanilla JavaScript. Let's just clear that.
Good question. So it seems like lots of doing is kind of straightforward JavaScript. We're using jQuery because it's uniform, or it's required.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Like most of the manipulations you're doing seem like straight JavaScript to me. So the question is, what does jQuery get you? Is it uniform?
I'm gonna get to that.
That's what we're going to
Yep.
Okay.
So actually, what we've been doing is not actually JavaScript. Everything I've done so far has been jQuery, and I'm going to introduce a little bit of JavaScript, and then I'm going to go into the difference and how to spot the difference. So, oh, thank you. Better? Because I'm not watching that screen. Thanks for pointing that out. So a fast, quick bit of JavaScript I'm going to apply here might be a timeout. T equals set. It takes two arguments, an anonymous function, and a time, which is measured in milliseconds, so that should be 3 seconds. I'll split that open, and I'll just move this and paste it in here. So what I've done is a little bit of JavaScript is going to introduce a 3-second delay before the button appears. If I refresh, there it is. So we often work with the two together, and if you're new to the code, remember it waited for the document to be ready, and then it starts the count. But or maybe my computer's slow.
For one window, one timeout thread or several timeout threads.
Could we talk about this after? Just, I know everyone's going to have a lot of questions, and I don't want to lose the flow of what, because I'm going to try to cover a lot. But
Don't interrupt this thread.
yeah, keep that thread for after.
Just one question.
Yeah.
I see that you have a lot of functions. So is there an IDE that has, like, say, IntelliSense of some sort that will help me while writing the code?
I'm sorry?
Something that will like auto-complete commands that are available to you. Like you start typing.
It depends on your IDE. Like this one's a real basic one. I even thought it was free until I was told. There may be a plugin that has autocomplete, but this one doesn't. I actually really like this one because it's so simple. And I like IntelliJ for other reasons as well. I tend to use both.
All these
So-
set timeout and all these libraries, all these methods are those present in, say, class in JavaScript, or are they pulled from?
They're all global all the time that you can use. The jQuery methods won't be until you include jQuery, but there's a lot of documentation that lists them all. Afterwards, I can point you to a few. But once again, I can't go and teach all of them in this short amount of time. Just going to touch on a few things and try and give you some use cases for stuff like this. I'm just going to get rid of the timeout because I don't need it for the next example. One thing I thought I could do, how are we up for time? Actually, I'm not going to do. I was going to make the button live, but at the moment you'll see it's a div. With JavaScript and jQuery, we can change divs into clickable divs and have them function as buttons. We can change an A tag, which is normally a button, prevent the default nature of it, and make it act like a div. Sometimes there's reasons for this. For example, there's a lot of CSS that comes inherited with an A tag that you may not want if you're graphically styling it. And it might be quicker to grab a div which has nothing attached to it and style that and turn that into a clickable item. For example, you may have a image, a headline, an author name, and a whole bunch of copy, and they may be quite small and listed all down the right rail. And you want the whole item to be clickable, in which case you may not want to nest all of this stuff inside an A tag. Just make the div contain a clickable and attach a listener to it and have that fire off whatever you want it to do, usually a change of location. Another great use of JavaScript and jQuery on the front end is getting data and injecting it into the DOM after it's there. So let's do that. I think I did an example earlier where I chose second para and I put some text in it. Walking Dead. It's about to start. I'm excited. I hope it's going to start soon. So here we've thrown in a totally new amount of text. What happens if we want to get that data from somewhere else? So a quick test in the browser is if I were to go to Facebook. Actually, a better one would be, say, Walking Dead Facebook. You notice I'm not logged in. If I go to Facebook's page for The Walking Dead, you can see I can see a lot of stuff here, even though I'm not logged in. And if a little not so well-known fact is if you type the word graph in front of that, I now see a JSON object of data. So let's grab that URL and come over here to our console, type $get, pass in 2 arguments, which would be anonymous function and the URL. And let's do something with this. So that should grab all that data and dump it to the console. And there it is. It actually dumps it twice because if I had not used put in the console log, it would have fetched it anyway and thrown it there. But you can see the same object is all pulled there. So we can use that with our code. So here, I can put that code in here. Take this guy. But let's say instead of putting the whole amount of data in there, let's have a look at that object again. Plot outline. So here we're adding a button. We're going to go to the graph Facebook page, grab some JSON from there, and take the plot outline and jam it into our second para. So this is some serious crowbar stuff. Oh, wrong one. Refresh it. Here we go. Based on the successful and popular comic books of all time, we've got Robert Kirkman's stuff. Why stop here? Let's have a little more fun. Actually, I think I saw. Aha, there's an image. Cover. We have key value pairs, so cover source. So if I were to go to here and say dollar, I'm going to target the page container here. Now I'm going to append an image. So we want an image tag, and we want source, and we want to end the strings. And here we want to put data dot, what was it? Cover source. Fingers crossed that I didn't make a typo, but let's save that and refresh. There it is. We've grabbed the whole image and jammed it into our document. So there's one thing I want to touch on here, and that's something called CORS. CORS is a security thing implemented, and I'm immune to it because I'm running off my local machine here. But if this were operating off a server, you wouldn't be able to do what I just did. The reason I picked on Facebook and this thing is I didn't want to set up a server just for this example. If you want to take data off Facebook, you need to get authorization. To get around the CORS error, the server must allow you to take the data. And in Facebook's case, the Facebook account for The Walking Dead would need to create a widget within there and a security ID, which you'd also pass to take this data. But what I was trying to create in this example is what happens if it's my server? What happens if I'm serving this page and this is my data on my server? There's no CORS error. You can reach out and grab data off your own server without having to worry about. And without having a server and making this complex, I'm just picking on Facebook here. So what this means is that a web page can change its content depending on its state or the interaction from the user. Like a button may cause the user may click a button and it might go straight to the server and pull in whole new amounts of content, depending upon whether you're logged in or whether you're not. Another use case might be JavaScript is not searchable by Google. There may be parts of the page that you don't want searchable. For example, if you have an article page with an image, a headline, author, and copy, and down the right you've got related articles, you may not want the related articles to be searched, in which case JavaScript and jQuery is a great way to go and get that data and stick it in the DOM, yet a Google spider will not see it. Way off for time. So I've pretty much covered most of what I wanted to do today. If you want, I can jump further off the deep end and go into some really heavy stuff if you're interested. Everyone? Okay, so I'm just going to close this out and close this out. So you were asking earlier about jQuery and JavaScript, and often the two are used so closely together that when you're looking through code or someone else's code, you're wondering what is what. If I were to quickly look at some of this code here, you can see here I've got a selector, and here I'm applying a method. You'll see that pattern in code a lot, and then you'll remember the timeout. You'll start to see stuff that is not following this pattern. I'm just going to pull up an empty document here. That's not so empty. Get rid of that. Get rid of all of that. open it. From the inspector. So I'm going to go a little heavy for the non-coders here, but this is the end of the presentation. So if I were to have a function, thank you, and give it a namespace, make it executable, assign it to a variable, mylib, split the function open, return an object literal, and what should I return? Let's pick on RTB, and well, TechOps. I like the way that sounds. Okay, and here I'm going to assign them. So provided I haven't made a typo, this is a really, really complex way of writing, hello, this is RTB to the console. Let's see if I goofed. I didn't goof, thank God. So what have I done here? This is almost a closure. If I were to make these functions, let's say TechOps becomes a function. It should do the same thing. Oops.
Yeah, parentheses, let's TechOps.
Oh, here?
No.
Well, that's
The line above.
there?
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. Yep, my bad. So that worked, as you can see. So what I'm doing here, and there's a reason for me to show you all this, is when mylib executes TechOps, TechOps is bringing its environment with it. Especially if I were to assign this to a variable like Fred. I would say, I pick weird variable names. Fred equals. So here, this is pulling all the environment around it when it comes out. And the reason I showed you this is this is how jQuery was built. If I were to go to my other demo, just take a line. This one here. If I were to drop it here, you'll see a pattern. You'll see here, instead of mylib, we're calling $. Instead of TechOps, we're calling append. This is how jQuery is built. It's a library full of methods. And you'll start to see patterns. I often create my own libraries using this because it's a great way of compartmentalizing, if that's a word, code to make it portable across different applications in one library. And then I can move it from one application to another. It's a great way of moving code around. So that was just a quick jump off the deep end to show you how and what's actually happening here when you're calling all these different methods.